Well, good morning again, everyone. Morning. As you can see, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. And as we've been singing, we heard from the choir, it's beginning to sound a lot like Christmas. And I even noticed that some of you are wearing red this morning. So just a heads up, Christmas is coming. As we enter into this Christmas season, we at the church here are starting a series that will take us right through the Christmas season, and it will culminate on Christmas Eve. And the series is entitled, Behold. Behold. How many of you, that's a word you use once in a while? Anybody this morning? Behold, there's no snow outside. Behold, the Christmas choir. Now, we don't use that word, but we're familiar with it. We know it means something to do like look or see. And actually, the word behold is a biblical word, the Hebrew word and then the Greek word which followed. But the Hebrew word and the Greek word is actually used over 1,000 times, depending on your translation, in Scripture. So 1,000 times we see this word behold. And what is very interesting, in the Christmas story, in the birth of Christ, we see this word. Both Matthew and Luke, in their accounts of the birth of Christ, use it. For example, let me just read you a few passages. Matthew writes, "But while he thought on these things, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a dream. Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel." Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, and then Luke as well. And the angel said unto them, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people." And the English word that we translate behold, it means more than just look or see. It literally means to fill up the eye. And the idea there is to stop and look, pay attention. Don't miss this. So don't just give a quick glance or a casual look, but rather have a singular focus. Look intently on this. A number of years ago, my wife Lisa and I went to England with my sister and brother-in-law for a little holiday. And while we were there, we went to at least three, maybe four, maybe it's more than that, I don't know, art galleries. One would have sufficed for me. But anyway, we went to a number of them. And I remember, and in particular one, but I think all of them, but my brother-in-law and I would make our way through the art gallery, and we'd find ourselves waiting and waiting for my wife and my sister. We were glancing at the art. They were beholding the art. As we make our way through this Christmas season, where we see Christmas is all around us, it's so loud, it's everywhere. It's in the malls, it's on the radio, it's on playlists, it's in cards, Christmas cards in the mail, Christmas, Christmas. It is easy for us, especially if we're familiar with the story of the birth of Christ, to go through the season just giving a quick glance at the one born 2,000 years ago. And we as a church, together this season, we want to behold this child as we make our way through the Christmas season. And parents, you want to help your children to behold Christ. You don't want your children to behold the food, or behold the family, or behold the presents, but they would behold Christ. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a nicely decorated home, but if that is what Christmas is all about, you're missing the bigger picture. You're missing what you were made for. Beholding the Christ child, and we want to fill up our eyes with him this Christmas season. Now, if you're here this morning and you are dreading the Christmas season because you're grieving something in your life and you're just, I don't want to do Christmas, I wish it would just be January 1st. Can I encourage you that during this Christmas season, and you don't have to go rah-rah and celebrate, but that you would behold the Christ child. That's the best thing you can do for your life. And if you're here this morning and you're excited about the Christmas season, you're just like, I can't wait to do all of these things, I want to encourage you in the midst of that excitement, to behold the Christ child, because that's the most important thing that you can do. So we're going to be looking at this child, and you've heard of him that, as Isaiah said, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Those are 4 titles or 4 names, but there's a host of other things that he is called. And today we're going to begin looking at the title or the claim that Jesus is the light of the world. Behold the Christ child, the light of the world. So if you have a Bible, I invite you to turn to Isaiah chapter 8. And before Jesus made this declaration, this claim that he was the light of the world, 700 years earlier, the prophet Isaiah spoke of the Messiah's coming, the promised one's coming, as light coming into the darkness. If you were to read through the book of Isaiah, its narrative, he's talking about his time and place and what's happening in the land of Israel, in the land of Judah and Israel, but he's also looking ahead to the future. He's prophesying. And in the book of Isaiah, and with any prophet, there's a near fulfillment, but there's also a far fulfillment. And he's talking about the day when this promised one would come, the light of the world. So let's begin in verse 19, and Isaiah talking about, again, his present day. He writes this, or says this: when someone tells you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? Consult God's instruction and the testimony of warning. If anyone does not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. 2,700 years ago, in the land that we know as the land of Israel, things were not good. And the people were fearing, they'd heard of possible wars, that other nations, in particular the Assyrians, but they were going to come and attack them. And so the people were fearful, they were anxious, and they were looking for answers. They were wondering about the future. What's the answer? And Isaiah says to them, why would you go when someone says, go to a medium and spiritist? Why would you go to them? Now, a medium and spiritist were those people back in that day that would study the stars, the constellations, and through that study would say, here's what the future holds for you as a nation, but for you as a person. Why go and talk to astrologers? Why go and talk to those who consult the dead? I mean, you can't consult the dead. Why are you going to them looking for answers? Instead, go to God and his instruction, his word. Turn to God for an answer. Turn to God for a solution. And notice he says there, when you turn to those that speak a different message from God, he says there's no light of dawn. In other words, they're in the dark. Now, just before we move on in the passage, when we look at the metaphor light and darkness in our Bibles, there are a number of senses of meaning. One is speaking of right and wrong. So light is that which represents that which is morally right, and darkness represents that which is morally wrong. When we see countries in our world where people are being killed and people are being, just lots of things going on, we refer to them, they're in a dark place, they're in a dark country. So morally right, morally wrong. But there's another sense, and this is the sense here, both senses, but this one in particular is used here. It's the idea of light being understanding and clarity and guidance and knowledge. Darkness being ignorance and lostness and confusion. So he says, when you go to these people studying the stars or trying to communicate with the dead to get answers, man, you are going into the darkness. And again, Isaiah is looking ahead to the future, and he realizes things are bad now, but as the people turn to these other things, it's going to get even darker. So he goes on and he says, distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged, and looking upward will curse their king and their God. Then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness. In the midst of all of their problems, where were they looking for answers? It wasn't looking upward. The only time they would look upward is to curse God, is to blame him. But instead, they were looking to the earth. They were looking to mediums and spiritists. In other words, they were saying, the answer to our problems is us. We've got to figure things out. I want to ask you today, I think all of us would agree that we live in a dark world, that there are things going on that are not right. Where do we look, not simply as a country and a nation, but even as individuals, for help, for light, for solutions? Well, I think most of us here, we don't look to mediums and spiritists, although there are some people today who will call a psychic hotline. There are people today who will play with a Ouija board or have their tarot cards read, I think there's people that still go to fortune tellers. There's people who still read their horoscopes. And they engage in this activity called the paranormal, hoping to get answers. Most of us, wouldn't go to those sources. But do we kind of hope or believe that politics is the answer? If we could just elect the right party, you need to vote for this party because they're going to put the right agenda in, and then problems will be solved. Or maybe it's in the education system. We need to educate more people in the world, and that's the answer. Or maybe it's even scientific advancement. Once we've got this figured out, then we'll be able to solve the problems. Now, there's nothing wrong with science, and actually, science and education and politics are good things. They're gifts of God. But that's not where the answer is, looking to those things. And even at Christmas time, we still hear that message. We can figure things out, and we don't need to look to God. What's Christmas about? We hear the sound bites. It's about family, or it's about friends, or it's about food, or it's about, holidays. Those things are good things. But that's not what Christmas is about. When I was growing up years ago, and there was a song where a number of artists came together and they collaborated, and it was to deal with, I think it was the issue of poverty, world hunger, and they came up with this song called We Are the World. Anybody else familiar with that song, right? We are the world. If you don't know it, ask someone to sing it for you. We are the world, right? It's just like, and they're raising, millions of dollars. That's a wonderful thing. But to think that we ourselves can solve world hunger and violence and all the problems of our dark world, we read in Scripture, is that no, we aren't. And in Isaiah's day, they were looking to themselves to figure things out. We don't need you, God. We've got it covered. This is planet Earth, just one shot taken against the backdrop of stars lighting up the sky. I just want to remind you this morning of how small we are. We are in a solar system which is in the Milky Way galaxy, where there are, they estimate, 100 billion stars. So could you imagine that little blue dot revolving through space amidst 100 billion stars? And they would trying to use analogies so we can grasp how big our solar system is. They say the Milky Way galaxy, if it was the size of North America, our solar system is the size of a quarter. So we're very, very small in the Milky Way galaxy. And then we are told that there are millions, if not billions, of galaxies. We're still trying to build telescopes so we can see more and more into our known world. So here we are on this planet, and we've got red carpets and celebrities, and people are skiing and doing all their things, and we've got everything. We've got it all figured out. We know what's going on. Could it be that maybe we're in the dark? We're lost and ignorant and confused. That's the message of Christmas. The Christmas story isn't just a different message than the message we hear every day, that we can solve it. It diametrically opposes that message, and it says the light of the world comes from outside of earth. You're not going to find it in the world. It comes from outside. that everybody on this planet is stumbling in the darkness, looking for answers, trying to figure things out. But there's a God who sheds light on in the darkness. And Isaiah goes on to say this, nevertheless. So in other words, even though the people, Isaiah says, even though you're looking to the world and to things other than God, and even though you're in the darkness, there's a God who loves you. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. And here's the prophecy. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. Notice the narrative there. So Isaiah is saying in the land of Naphtali and in the land of Zebulun, which is in the north of Israel, and they bordered Syria. Syria, what's the other country? Syria and it was Iraq, but they bordered other countries. And what happened is the people of God that were to be the light of the world, they'd followed these other countries into the darkness. And Isaiah saying, even in the darkest place in the north, in Galilee, the light would come and shine. That the light would dawn in that very dark place. So we ask the question, who is or what is the great light? What is or who is the light that has dawned? 700 years after Isaiah wrote this, Matthew, who was a follower of Jesus, who once was a tax collector, started following Jesus, saw him die on a cross, and then saw him raised to life again. He said in Matthew chapter 4, the light that Isaiah was talking about was speaking about Christ. And the light that Isaiah prophesied about was filled in Christ. That Christ was the light that has come into the world. And I'm sure as he wrote this, he was thinking of what Jesus said. And John actually copied it down for us. The words of Jesus himself, who said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Now today, we see light all around us. But when Jesus spoke this, it was against the dark sky. 2,000 years ago, he spoke this in the temple court. And he made this claim. It was during the festival of tabernacles, or the festival of booths, or tents. And this was a time, there were 3 festivals that the Jews would go to: the festival of Passover, the festival of Pentecost, and the festival of tabernacles. And this was the big one. And he is there, Jesus, at the festival of tabernacles, which was a time where they'd come and the people would come into Jerusalem and they'd celebrate God's abundance, the harvest, but they'd celebrate his provision of their ancestors, how they looked after them. When the people were in the land of Egypt and were being mistreated, they cried out to God. Remember, Moses, let my people go. And they called out to God, and God delivered them from the Egyptians, and they came out and they went into the promised land. But before they did, for 40 years, they wandered around in the desert, and they lived in tents, and God provided water for them. And God provided in Exodus 13 a pillar of light, a fire for them to guide them. And so here is Jesus as they're gathering, reenacting the Exodus. They're reenacting this. He takes 2 elements, just like he did at the festival of Passover, where he said, this bread here that we're eating represents my body, and this cup or the wine represents my blood. He takes 2 elements of the festival of tabernacles, the water and the light, and he applies them to his life. He says to them, if any of you thirst, come to me and you'll never be thirsty again. That he was a fountain of living water. But he also says, I'm the light of the world. And according to the oral tradition, which is in the Mishnah, that during the Festival of Tabernacles in the temple court, they had 4 menorahs, or candelabras rather, and each candelabra was 75 feet tall. 75 feet tall. And they had 4 of them, and they were lit up. And Josephus, who was a historian at the time, wrote that, with Jerusalem being built on hills and the temple, you could see the temple, on the top of the hill, that these candelabras, they just lit up the night sky. In this very dark night where there are no street lights, the people from all around Jerusalem, Josephus said, could look at the light. The candelabras that represented the pillar of fire that God led their ancestors by years ago. And it's there that Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And it was such a claim about him, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father and all of this, that he's the light of the world. It was such a claim that John tells us that they didn't seize him on the spot. In other words, he was surprised that those that were against him didn't arrest him right then and there and have him killed, but it would actually be another 6 months before that took place. So they were totally offended by him saying he was in the light of the world, because that says you're in the dark, you're lost, you're ignorant, you're confused. You need me to illuminate. 2 functions of light. The first one is light reveals. It illuminates the dark place. If you're here this morning, you're a guest with us, and you're not yet a follower of Jesus Christ, and the idea is Jesus saying to you that you're ignorant and confused and you're lost, and you say, I find that offensive, I want to say, you're on the right track, because it is offensive. In our world where everybody says, we're okay, we don't need Jesus, we don't need God, we can manage just fine, thank you very much. Jesus says, no, actually, you do need me, because you're in the dark. Light reveals. I want to ask you, have you beheld the light of the world that came into this world to save you from your sins? He died on a cross for you, and you said, I will repent, as you say, I will turn from going into the darkness, and I will turn and go into the light. If you've never made that decision, you can today, by a simple decision of faith, say, Jesus, I want you to be my light. I want you to come in and save me. But that's just the first step in following Jesus. Then you go through life following Jesus. And that's the second function of light, is light guides. Just as the pillar of fire, in a sense, pillar of fire led their ancestors through the wilderness. Jesus says, I will lead you through life. And if you follow me, you listen to what I reveal through my word to you, you will never walk in the darkness. In other words, if you go against what I say, you're going into the darkness. But if you follow me, you will have the light that leads to life. In other words, Jesus is saying to you, you don't know what's best for your life. And what other people tell you what's best for your life is not the best thing for your life. I know what is best for your life. When it comes to marriage, if you want to get married, when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to finances, when it comes to anything, I am the light. And if you follow me, I will guide you to the life you were meant to live. Shocking claim that Jesus made. I am the light of the world. I was downstairs in the basement here with the Sunday school rooms, right? It's a maze to begin with down there, right? But I was in one of the rooms, and when I turned off the light to go back up the stairs, someone had turned off the lights down there. And I couldn't see a thing. I was in the dark. And I was walking in the hallway in the dark, just kind of, I knew the exit was that way somewhere. I hit something. Thud. And if you ever hit something and it hurts, well, it hit me in the right spot, and it hurt. And so I hobbled down the highway. Hobbled down the hallway, and I flicked on the light switch, right? I could see, it revealed, turned around, it was a table in the hallway that I'd hit, right? Now, I'm grateful for visible light, and I'm sure you are too. But I'll tell you, I am more grateful for spiritual light. That I'm on that little planet spinning around. Like, where did I come from? Why am I here? How should I live? Where am I going? I'm grateful that the same God who said, let light shine out of the darkness, made his light shine in my heart so that I would have the light of the knowledge of his glory displayed in the face of Jesus Christ. I was at chapters, Indigo, I keep saying that, and that's another story, but anyway, it's at Indigo, and with my family on Friday night, it was a chance that we could be together, so we went out and let's all go to Indigo after, because we all like books. And so I was in Indigo, and the one in Kitchener, and it was just, Christmas was all around me, right? The Christmas music was playing, and the Christmas colors, and they had all these gifts that you could buy there. And as I'm in that store and Christmas is loud, there's a book on a book table by an author who wrote a book about heaven years ago. And in his book about heaven, God is not there, it's just us. And he wrote a follow-up book. And it was there on the table. And of course, I thought to myself, I'm not buying that book. But the other thought came to me, and it was the picture of that little earth spinning in the midst of our galaxy, in the middle of nowhere. And I thought to myself, here's a guy who's trying to tell me what's going to happen after I die. That guy is lost, ignorant, and confused. And I am lost, ignorant, and confused. We're all in the dark. And there in the midst of Indigo, with the Christmas music playing, I took a minute and I worshiped Christ. Thank you that I know where I'm going when I die and what heaven's going to be like. Thank you. He is the light of the world. Parents, fill up or work at filling up your child's eye this Christmas, not with presents and food and family. Those things are good, and glance at those things. But do your best to fill up their eye with Jesus, because he's the one that we will behold for all eternity. And with that in mind, I thought of just a trigger or something to help us, to prompt us during this Christmas season leading up to Christmas, is lights. So here's a house. Hopefully that's not your neighbor's house. Maybe that's your house, I don't know. Right? Christmas lights, and we start to see them on buildings. And actually, Christmas lights or lights on buildings actually came from lights on a Christmas tree, which actually came from someone who understood that the true light of the world had come into it. Martin Luther, who's the Protestant of the Reformation, 500 years ago, was walking home from church, the story goes, walking home from church during the Christmas season, reflecting on the wonder of God coming to us. And in the woods, through the pine trees, in the dark night, he could see the stars and the light of the stars through the trees. So he went home that night, and they at the time, I believe it was at the time, they had a tree called the Paradise Tree, but they had a tree. And so he took some candles, and I'm not sure if he attached the candles to the tree, because that started to happen at least after Martin Luther, but he either attached the candles to the tree or put the candles around the tree so that he could show his kids that Jesus was the light of the world. And so people started to put candles on their trees, and eventually they figured out, that's not the best thing, so they put candles in candle holders on the tree, but that wasn't the best thing. And then, I think it was in 1900 or 1903, around the time, Thomas Edison, who invented the electric light bulb, he and a colleague came up with this brilliant idea. And do you notice the selling feature there? Don't burn your house down with candles. Buy these electric miniature lamps. And they're quite expensive in the day, so some people, they just had to rent them. But that's where the tradition of Christmas lights comes from. So when you and I, this Christmas season, see the Christmas lights all around us, may it be a reminder of the true light that came into the world. And let's behold him this Christmas. And I don't know what that means for you. For me, at times it's putting on Christmas music and just lifting my heart to God. At other times, it might be doing something for someone. Let us behold the light of the world. I'm going to ask you to stand. And just before we sing a song that speaks of the light stepping into the darkness, I'm going to invite you to bow your head if you would like at this time. And just right now, would you take a moment as we are just entering in the Christmas season and ask God to help you to behold him? And then if you have family and maybe you have someone that's not walking with Jesus, that you would pray that this Christmas season, that God would work in their hearts so that they too would behold Jesus. So let's just take a moment and pray.